This afternoon, Books and Books is very happy to welcome back Ms. Jen Karetnick, presenting her new book, American Sentencing, and Ms. Rita Maria Martinez, presenting her new book, The Jane and Bertha in Me. And here to introduce Jen and Rita, we have a special guest. She is the author of such books as Havana and Other Missing Fathers and Chance Born. She's a good friend of the store. Please welcome to the podium Ms. Mia Leonin.
Good afternoon. Everybody can hear me okay? Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me to introduce you, Jen and Rita. I wanted to say a couple of decades ago, I came to Miami looking for family ties and cultural connections. My father was a Cuban exile that I met later in life. And luckily, I didn't find exactly what I was looking for here in Miami. Instead, I found actors, artists, and best of all, poets. And two of them we're celebrating today, Jen Karetnick and Rita Martinez. And not only are we celebrating their new books that are just out, I feel like it's important to say we're celebrating two human beings who, as writers and teachers, form like a really important part of the fabric of the literary scene in Miami. And I want to celebrate that as well. I think we're going to start with Jen. We're going to start with Jen. And when I asked them to send me a very brief bio, for the intro, I thought to myself, is Jen going to be able to do that? Because she really writes her ass off. She's written a lot. I'm like, how will she send me a brief bio? But here's a little bit about her, if you don't know her. I've known her since 1994, so I can say that. Jen is the author of 3 full-length collections of poetry, including The Treasures That Prevail from White Point Press, and the book that we're celebrating today, American Sentencing, from Winter Goose Publishing. She's also the author of 4 poetry chapbooks, and the editor of 2 anthologies, as well as the co-author of 3 cookbooks. Her poems and prose have recently appeared or are forthcoming from theatlantic.com, Guernica, Negative Capability, and Prairie Schooner. Jen also works as a creative writing director for the Miami Arts Charter School, the dining critic for Miami Magazine, and she's a freelance lifestyle journalist. See what I mean? She writes a lot. American Sentencing is a collection of poems that is as formally diverse as it is emotionally rich. The publisher succinctly describes the book as an intense examination of the physical body and the various indignities and ailments from which it can suffer. Jen's poems, for me, speak of the body with a real honesty, but she rightfully reminds us that it's our mind that's often the source of our grievances. In the poem Body, My House, Jen writes, "The body lets go of pain that is too painful to recall, but the mind drags on any hurt more than fist-sized." American Sentencing is formally impressive. It's, if you like formal poetry, it's a treasure trove of villanelles, which she wickedly spells as villain, as in bad guy, and L as in the French for female. But what I love the most about Jen's book is, and it's one of the things I love the most about Jen, is her characteristically wry and very dry, think vermouth, wit. And everybody who knows Jen just chuckled a little bit. So her really wry sense of humor comes through, and in fact, I think it balances out the really serious subject matter of the book and sends sparks of insight and tenacity flying through the collection. It's a beautiful book. Please help me welcome Jen Karetnick.
Thank you, Mia. When we asked you to do that, I didn't know you were going to be so complimentary. I thought you'd say, like, here's Jen. Let's go. Oh, I have known Mia since 1994, and I think Mia thinks that I graduated from University of Miami with a degree in poetry, but I actually was in the fiction program. Right? See? Yeah. I used going back to school as an excuse to go back to school. But I already had a degree in poetry, and I was just bored, and I really liked school. So I went back to get a degree in fiction, and I took as many poetry courses as I possibly could. So I wound up studying with Mia and another one of our really good friends, Julian, and they both think that I graduated with a degree in poetry. This is a book about chronic invisible illness and people who suffer from it. And I did dedicate it to that, and I dedicated it also to their caretakers. And I did dedicate it to my brother as well. And one of the caretakers is sitting in this room. That's my husband. So that's my own personal doctor, Dr. Cross. Yeah. But there are lots of caretakers sitting in this room as well. And I think there are caretakers all over the country who have to deal with these kinds of things, as well as the people who suffer from them. And it's not a pleasant subject, so I'm going to read some of the lighter poems today. And people don't like to talk about pain, and they don't like to talk about chronic illness. They don't like to talk about people who suffer from it. They'd prefer to just sweep it under the rug. And that's okay until someone like Prince dies from it. And then it comes out, and there's all sorts of articles written about chronic pain. And they say, oh, there's an epidemic. Well, there's always been an epidemic. We just prefer not to look at it. So one of my students just graduated yesterday, and they're sitting here, some of them, and they'll be standing here one day. I know they will. And they asked me how long I've been writing this book. So I could say all of my life, because I've been sick all of my life, I guess. Some of these poems are really, really, really old. So I'm going to read the oldest one in the book first. And it's called The Match. And it's about when doctors find out where they are going to do their residency. And Morgan, you'll be doing this one day. This is a sestina, The Match. The young doctors herd like sheep in white lab coats, freshly bleached. Clip-on photo name tags and black felt tips lined up, the regimentals of soldiers. Hands in well-deep pockets, they fidget with the objects carried to test the senses, pins, toothpicks, matchsticks, as they mill in the auditorium to match to residency programs. Framed by a white screen, the dean painstakingly takes his annual test, calling out, one at a time, the names he can't see to pronounce, reading glasses in his pocket. Hours earlier, the student regiment took 9 oaths, promising to prescribe a regimen for the good of my patients, in voices that matched each other for Hippocratic fervor, pockets of ancient belief stitched, however briefly, to white-coated supplicants, who invoked by gods the name and prayed for no more of these awful tests of nerves. Weren't the board exams test enough, those impossible blue books regimented by medical societies with medieval names, and the autopsies, anatomy classes that matched students to cadavers, odors leaching faces white. Still, some place the envelopes in their pockets unopened, or scan the cellophane pocket that displays only the student's name as if to further test themselves, delaying the disappointment or the white-hot flare of relief. Other members of the regiment dip into their orders as if to a matchless feast, shouting out the names of their assignments, naming the initials, ENT, OB, they'll sew onto the pockets of their spotless coats. And then the match is over. 4 years of academic tests behind, 4 years of training to go, the regiment pivots in this moment as young, white-clad brides do from one name to another. Tests are now for patients with deep pockets. Actually, not so deep anymore. The daily regimen reassures the toothpicks, the unlit matches, the coats of healthy white. I'm going to pour myself some water. Hang on a sec. It really does seem forever ago that I wrote that, because it was. And in honor of my daughter, who also graduated yesterday, I'm going to read a poem about her when she was 6 months old, or 3 months old, and had colic. She's now 18. This is called echolalia, which is a medical term. That means to repeat. Outside the incessant wails of peacocks, clever mimics of my baby's colic, rising and rising in the humid night, propel me from my temporal seat. Back arching, her legs point into pitchforks, stabbing my ribs as we rock and walk. The doctor says don't overstimulate, try not to bore her, burp more, medicate. Startled, her tongue fans out to explore her mouth, clownish, stained with cherry flavor, Tylenol, Oragel, Milacon, wine. Whatever liquid works to keep me calm. Placebos until she wears herself out. Only she knows what this is all about. Only she knows what this is all about. Placebos until she wears herself out. Whatever liquid works to keep me calm. Tylenol, Oragel, Milacon, wine. Her mouth clownish, stained with cherry flavor. Startled, her tongue fans out to explore. Try not to bore her. Burp more. Medicate. The doctor says don't overstimulate. Stabbing my ribs as we rock and walk, back arching, her legs point into pitchforks, propel me from my temporal seat. Rising and rising in the humid night, clever mimics of my baby's colic. Outside, the incessant wails of peacocks. And if you've ever heard peacocks, you know they sound just like a baby. We hear them all the time. They're right next door to us. My mother was lucky enough to have me when amniocentesis was invented. So she got poked a lot because they didn't know that you can only poke somebody once, or they didn't realize that the more you poked somebody, the more chance you had of losing a baby. So, and they also hadn't invented ultrasound yet, so they guessed where I was. So maybe that's why I'm the way I am. I don't know. This poem is called The Invention of Amniocentesis. Mother, in your womb, I am an experiment. You pass on not immunity, but its silvery underside. Give permission for the needle like an arrow to birth holes in this temporary home. Sip the fluid like a taster of fine wines without the benefit of a visible image. No bigger than a black widow's spider, the doctors must guess where I am and agree there is nothing to be done. I am poison to both of us. Unsafe harbor, you insist on mooring me to your designated slip, tossed by rash after rash of storms. I will remove myself early. Still ill, of course you will not be able to care for me right away. Of all the eggs you might have nourished, I am the one who breaks you. Not really. She's still here. This is the title poem of the book. An American Sentence is actually something created by Allen Ginsberg in answer to the haiku. It's a sentence of 17 syllables. And if you read this poem and the last one actually down, you will see that it's a sentence of 17 syllables. Between you and me, there is no doubt in your mind. I have been here before and will be again for pseudo-gout, reversible lupus, diseases ephemeral as the skeptical blink. Unimpressive, you say. It is no difference to you. Once again, a test outcome is negative, as if I am less than the sum of zero, a body that registers nothing, not even the pretzel knot of all its parts. Look down my throat, peer in my ears. Allow your instruments to dictate the truth as you have learned it. Joint, connecting symptoms to diagnosis, not the tissue of intuition, not the fatty imagination, not the instinct of the gut that is flexible and in no way demonstrable. This is a fun one. A lot of my poems started as models for my students, and this is one that not only started as a model, but was from a field trip that I took with my students to the Miami Book Fair International, which Books and Books, as you probably all know, is responsible for. And we went to the China Pavilion. It was the Chinese Year of Literature. And I decided that I would actually have my tongue looked at and diagnosed and see if the Chinese healer could tell me what was wrong with my body. And this is what I learned. This is after Elizabeth Bishop's poem, which many of you will probably recognize. It's a villanelle. And it's called Alternative Art, after her poem, Another Art. The practitioner diagnoses my tongue at the China Pavilion at Miami Book Fair International. Lolling, rolling, wagging, playful, qualities ideal for a dog. But in a tongue? Indictful of a pattern, the throat unable to clear itself of growing frogs, lolling, rolling, wagging, playful in the ponds behind the tonsils. And my words may have culinary swag, but on my palate, it seems indictful of disease, imprinted like molars, coating the surface with a fog of lolling, rolling, wagging, playful slime cities, the fruit of mold, no fertile ground about which to brag. And of such a tongue, so indictful, there's a blue of something as yet untold by my body's imperfect hold, lolling, rolling, wagging, playful on its tongue. Well, this was not insightful. She had no idea. But that's okay, because Western doctors don't really know either. They do now, but it took them a long time. So this is what I do every day. This is called Routine for the Invisibly Ill. And it's a hustle, which means that you'll hear a lot of repeating words at the end that sound the same. And this one is pills, because that's what I do all day long. I take pills. 1, summer version. Upon waking, it's time to take my pills. But first, I pick from my lashes the pills of cat hair and cosmetics I failed to wash down the mouth of the drain like pills. I pee and read People, in which people like me and also not like me complain about their pills. I walk the dogs and collect dozens of mangoes, those overgrown, puckering pills. Try to persuade my husband it's his turn to filter water and grind French roasted pills. I drive my kids to soccer camp so they can kick into nets and heads the bloated pills that give them aches and pains in closed up places like stubborn, blistered packets of pills. Throw into the dishwasher a few plates and powdered detergent compressed into pills. Head to my office to answer the phone, to listen to the automated message informing me that my pills are ready to be picked up. Start the computer and stare at the words staring back at me. Black, bitter pills. 2, winter version. It is not Alice who grows, but the pills I swallow like foul language. Pills half as big as the size of my thumb. Capsules I could open into a drink. Pills filled with poison when someone's back is turned. Nor is there a pill of hope that I could ever stop washing down, not just meds, but these oblong and opaque pills, vitamins, antioxidants, supplements, that accumulate on my chart like pills on a sweater. It's as if I wear my cells outside in, or my skin with holes, pills pricked into its hole, so minuscule they can't be seen, but also can't be sewn. Pills that let everything valuable escape, pills for which there are no plug-shaped pills. And the last one I'm going to read from this book before I go on to more cheerful subjects like the apocalypse. This is the one Mia referenced, and it's called Body My House, which comes from a line from a Mae Swenson poem, which is a really beautiful poem that is also quoted in the book. It's actually body, my horse, my hound, my house, what would I do without you? And it just spoke to me in a way that I think she actually meant it to be. This was after a kidney surgery that went horribly wrong. So body, my house, they wouldn't give me any pain medication. It was awful. I don't recommend that. Eventually, the body remembers nothing. Pierce it with needles as if trussing a turkey. Core it like an apple for surgery. Punch it. Kick it. Splinter its architecture in the teeth of a wolf. Burn it with coffee poured from the wrong side of the carafe. Engulf it with the surge of a hurricane named after someone you know. Organ or artery, muscle or fat, mute and amnesiac, the body sweats it out night after night, drenching the sheets, flushing stalled heart rhythms, those marshy ponds of lungs, paralytic intestines blown up like animals made out of balloons. The body lets go of pain that is too painful to recall. But the mind drags on any hurt more than fist-sized like a shadow, sometimes eager, sometimes reluctant, depending on the cast of light, depending on what hour of day or night it wishes to re-examine its failures of composure. The mind recalls how the shrieks of nails torn from lumber are not at all like the pangs of childbirth, and how unlikely is tolerance when you most expect it. The mind memorializes how pain rattles it, and the ease with which its shelter, no matter how shored up, gives in. I'm going to read just a couple more before I yield the microphone and the water to Rita. I always have to read one for my son when I read one for my daughter, even when they're not here, because I know that somehow they know, and they will be upset when I get home, even though they don't care enough to come to the readings. And I know that this is being live streamed, so yes, that is a direct dig at you both. On teaching my son to hard boil eggs. Permit 2 eggs to recline in cold water, I say. Cover their pale ovals as china fine and fragile as a mind. Fire the gas on high and boil. He wants to know how long, precisely, it will take the water to reach its song of plops and crackles, wreak havoc on the viscous liquid innards, insists on setting the timer. He's that kind of kid, to whom I tell my shopping list to keep from forgetting. Just watch. And he does, because he must. He's got a little of that OCD in him. It's a family trait. So, speaking of family traits, I'm going to read this one for you, Jeff. This is called On the Compound. It is National Mango Month. We can't let an opportunity go by without mentioning mangoes. And my nephew, Jeff, has collected quite a few of them for me. The jam pots simmer on the stove, burping volcanic splatter when lids are removed. This one wafts ginger, that one breathes chilies, a third puffs vanilla and cinnamon. We have already stuffed the freezer chest with quarts of diced fruit for smoothies and sangrias, diced the chutneys, pickles, and salsas, loaded the dry sauna of the dehydrator to run for 12 hours at a time, and turned the odd, slippery bits into strips of toothsome leather. We are making the best of a too early bounty, the trees dumping hundreds of pieces of fruit daily before school has released for the summer, before help can be ordered from the children as if from a menu, although danger under the branches is as constant as myth and persistent as rumor. To gather mangoes, you must protect your head and watch your footing, guard against the inhaling of bugs that zip like synapses, burrowing into the craters where the lava of sap has burned holes. Your arms burst into blooms of sinew, your thighs squat until the muscles stand stiff as beaten egg whites. There is no need for gyms and Pilates programs during season, when heavy with molten juice, each mango is a barbell, and every bag of them is a medicine ball we are determined to haul, and equally desperate to drop. On the plantation, the fruits of our labor must be transformed before they rot, before it's for naught, and what we eat and drink later this year is not the sweetness of victory over the due course of nature in the subtropics, but the preservation of all that we have given so gladly to this exercise. So mango season is a little late this year, but Jeff, I will be requiring your assistance in about 2 weeks, just so you know. These 2 poems are from my next book, which comes out in September. And I wasn't kidding when I said the apocalypse, because it's about the drowning of Miami, which could or could not happen. We really don't know, do we? But if you're a climate change denier, you might not leave the room. This is called Postmodern, and then I'm going to read the last poem, which is the title poem of the book. 1. If you build it, you will stay in it now. 2. We have no destinations now. 3. The house is an ark, and we sleep like bats now in hammocks. 4. Our eyes are sanded with washed up glitter now. 5. We write our stories with burning bark now, the letters veining the clouds. 6. The guitar is a Moses basket now, the flute is a pipe. We make music like trees. 7. We have no art now. 8. Now no one goes to school. 9. The ocean is our education, the tides our teachers now. 10. The cats have no kittens now, or drop them in the forks of roads that wash clean like memory with the moon. 11. We eat our fruit green now. 12. Now we no longer defend everything we've ever known. We no longer lay claim to everything we've ever owned. We are nothing but ourselves now. 13. We are pioneers now. There is a new frontier now. We go east now. We go east. 14. We are not young now. We were never young now. 15. This is not the end now, but neither is it the beginning. 16. Now is not the time to panic. 17. We have work to do now. And the book is actually called The Treasures That Prevail. It comes from an Adrienne Rich poem, or the idea did at least, which is very, very well known. And the title of this poem is Skiing Barefoot Over the Wrecks. And I think a lot of you probably know the poem it came from. And it starts with a quote, "I came to see the damage that was done and the treasures that prevail." Skiing barefoot over the wrecks. The trick is to ease the hold on the handle. Don't allow knuckles to knot like curtains over a rod braced between the shoulders of a double-hung window. I lie back in the water to start, feet meeting hands greeting rope at mid-thigh, ears immersed in the amniotic bouillon, listening only to the heartbeat of the ocean as if there is no other world, was never another world below me. I give a thumbs up to the driver of the boat who will ease me, feeding me out from the other end of this cord before pulling taut, and I resist the drag. This is not labor. The spray claps my face like applause, each drop one of approval. And while the wind in my hair is generated, the source of its power is not man-drilled, not a god, but the childish, oblivious sun, who cares nothing about what goes on underneath it, about what it can or cannot dry up. And I am up, riding the weedy surface on the flats of my feet, over flooded, flattened houses whose ghosts billow under my soles, blowing up into a white-tipped wake that my heels zip through, sun-bruised, mango-cured, tough as sharks. Still, they are spiny sea urchins, these spirits of screened-in Florida rooms where pianos used to wait for hands, reluctant as fire in wet sawgrass. Underutilized kitchens owned by diners who preferred restaurants. Bedrooms that saw nothing more than too little sleep, achieved with the open mouth of the dead and disrespectful. Now the Dade County pine floors, once so prized and polished, or scarred by termites and the careening claws of dogs, have rotted either way into driftwood. Coral has gone back to coral. The dogs who have been left to us wear life jackets, and the dead live again, reefs for grouper and parrotfish. If I look down into the foundations of heartbreak and recovery, epiphanies and realizations, culminations and failures, I too will fall, forgetting all fundamentals, unable to tuck and roll, my external walls shooting nails in every direction to wash up later on the beaches like teeth, each room of my body cartwheeling into disrepair. So I keep my eyes forward toward what would be the ponytails of palms and the canopies of mangoes, if those trees still rooted here, and my grip casual, thumbs lined up next to index fingers as if on a golf club, holding on to nothing too dear, too dearly. Thank you.
Hello again. Rita Maria Martinez teaches writing and tutors at Nova Southeastern University. Her poetry has appeared in journals such as the Notre Dame Review, Plowshares, and Two River View. Her poetry's also been published in Stephen Minot's kind of classic textbook, Three Genres, and the anthology Burnt Sugar, Caña Quemada, Contemporary Cuban Poetry in English and Spanish. Rita's book of poems, The Jane and Bertha in Me, is an expansive, freewheeling, literary interpretation of who the character Jane Eyre was and could be today. Of the book, Denise Duhamel writes, Martinez's astounding poems are literary, conversational, personal fun, as she confidently transports her Janes from the Moors to Macy's, from Thornfield Hall to the world of tattoos. I've known Rita many years, and I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to read some of these poems in their manuscript form. And I want to add that riding the winds of Rita's imagination, the possibility in each poem whirls around us like a feisty dance of literary veils. It's truly a wild, spectacular read, and I'm really excited to hear her. So please help me welcome Rita.
Hi. Thank you to everyone who's here, to Books and Books and Mitchell Kaplan, to Jen and to Mia. I was really happy that you could be here. This is my high school copy of Jane Eyre that I still have. And a sign that you're getting old is when your books start getting, those rust stains, and they start getting yellow, and then the pages start falling out, and you're like, oh dang, I'm getting old, right? And I have in the back written possible essay topics that the teacher was saying at St. Brendan High, and I wrote them all down here. So it's a relic, but a relic I'm glad I held on to. This book is dedicated to Bronteites who love Jane, to my parents who've always supported my academic endeavors, and for Todd, my husband, a medical librarian who has longed to catalog this book for a long time, and who someone said the other day something about, oh, you should be reading such and such Bronte course. And my husband said, I've been taking this course for 12 years, or I've been listening to this course for, actually, I think you said 12 years. All right. So, este libro en parte es dedicado a mis padres que siempre me han apoyado los estudios míos y siempre me han apoyado en mis aspiraciones. So I'll read the first poem, which talks about how it all began. I covered it with clear contact paper, wrote my name in caps across the foredge in black marker. The bloated book rested on my desk like a rainbow trout. Mrs. Lloyd poised on the stool, her bangs in bob, stiff like a man in a toupee, face primed with a thick coat of concealer. She hinted a secret at the heart of the text. I spotted it in her eyes whenever she laughed, flung her arms like tentacles, crossed her legs, private insanity hidden inside her wisteria wool skirt, tucked out of sight like Thornfield's third-floor tenant, Linda Blair's precursor, the basket case languishing in bed. I read in bed, on the bamboo love seat, beneath the shade of my father's banana trees. I scarfed the pages like pork rinds, yucca chips, crackers slathered with guava jelly. I binged constantly. Sunk my canines into text while Blur's boys and girls wailed in the background like Bertha on speed. I carried it for weeks inside the outer pocket of my Eastpak like Tic Tacs, a compact I'd flip open during lunch between classes. Before soccer practice, the Bantam paperback lodged between Agnes Gray and Wuthering Heights at Adolph's bookstore. Its spine red-orange like papaya pulp. I plucked it from the shelf and stared at the cover. The forlorn wedding dress yearning for Jane's scapula. Her small breasts, the warmth of her hips when she walks across the bedroom and steps into wedding slippers, then into absence. The foot's descent, consuming as quicksand, the subtle curve of her arch sheathed by glass. So that's how the obsession started, right? Okay, so the next one I'm going to read about is called, let's see. The next one I'm going to read about is about Laci Peterson. Some of you may have heard that name. She was born in 1975 and passed away in 2002. She was an American woman who went missing while 7.5 months pregnant with her first child. Her husband, Scott Peterson, was later convicted of murder in the first degree for Laci and in the second degree for their prenatal son, Connor. And I always see there's like this famous picture of her where she kind of looks like, if I had known her, she would have been my friend. That's kind of like when I see that picture of her, and it also strikes a chord because she was born the same year that I was born. Okay. Jane dreams of Laci Peterson. Captivated by stories of abusive relationships, of mysterious death and missing persons, I watched late-night programs like Wicked Attraction, The New Detectives, and Deadly Women. Fascinated by blood splatter theory, gunpowder residue, fingerprint bruises on abandoned female corpses, I hoped to crack the code behind Bertha's unabashed cackle. Wondered if I could cope with Eddie's cockamamie plan to keep her a caged gerbil. One evening, I caught a recap on Laci's fate, the Bay slowly erasing her features as her husband nonchalantly purchased and watched snuff films, streamed an endless parade of women on his high-def screen, their faces eventually blurring like Laci's. He could barely remember what the wife looked like, though her photo was plastered everywhere. So pretty and pregnant in that little black cocktail dress. Finally, the decomposed body surfaced, limbs drifting like disembodied mannequin parts. After the baby washed ashore, those at the morgue admired its perfectly formed fingernails, its golden eyelashes, which flooded my thoughts, then my dreams, for months. Always the same image, Connor's eyelashes dissolving into a warm golden light, enveloping Laci, who eternally sleeps on a bed of sand, seashells, nestled and glowing in her hair. I wanted to say thank you to some online communities that have been very supportive, like the Bronte blog, Pond and Hall, the Sisters Room. It's kind of interesting because lately I've been friending different people online, a lot of them who live in the UK who I've never met before, but there's sort of this tie that everybody has through this book. And I really do have to apologize if there is someone who hasn't read Jane Eyre, because that's always the conundrum right? When you read, it's like your first experience really should be reading the book and knowing as little about it as possible. My high school teacher, she said, don't read the introduction in the beginning of the book, right? Because there are spoilers. So I do really have to apologize. Okay. I always feel that I have to. I can't help it. But still, don't let that stop you from reading it. Okay. So the next poem I'm going to read is called Governess to Go. All right. Governess to Go. Like a paramedic, you're always prepared. Sun pass, GPS, several pairs of sunglasses stowed in the glove compartment. The trunk of mobile office brimming with the stock of your trade index cards, grammar books, charged laptop. You enter their homes like a priest, pet their little white dogs, blend into their storyline. You worry about the gifted sixth grader who vomits the week before midterms. You tutor the whiz kid who refuses to shave a barely there mustache. An aspiring video game designer with Asperger's, he forgets to greet you at the door. You assist the Xbox enthusiast who attempts great height with a voluminous pompadour he teases into defying gravity. You help the Brobdingnagian slacker inhabiting a universe ill-fitted to skyscraping adolescence. An eighth grader always hunching to avoid bumping his head beneath doorways. You try reaching the one who doesn't seem to care about anything or anyone. Drifts through days with earbuds attached like he's plugged into the Matrix. You're up on the dirt, the stingy ex-husband, the mother who forced her son to write with his right even though he's a lefty, the girl who dozed during SATs, the boy who seized in the crib and zips his backpack shut after bullies spit inside, the moody sophomore whose grades skyrocket when he starts dating, whose abuela says he should first master keeping his calzoncillos clean, his boxers. You cater to the protege with the tiger mom who demands you assign more homework. The kid never smiles except when mentioning spies and favorite fictional character, Alex Rider. You tend to the secretive soccer player who attempts texting during sessions, her fingertips sheathed by Band-Aids. You worry about each one. You have no children of your own. Logic says, don't get attached if they offer wallet-sized senior pictures, friend you on Facebook, or reveal tidbits the parents don't know. They'll move on. They'll struggle to remember your name several years from now. These kids, like fashions on the red carpet, are on loan. After golden statuettes are distributed, and after parties fizzle, sparkly pins and pave rings return to the vault. Gauzy and sequin gowns are zipped and taken to the mothership. So I struggled a little bit with what Jen was saying. Do you read the poem about being sick or do you not read it, right? But I sort of feel that the main poem that addresses that in the Jane and Bertha in me, I sort of feel, at least today, I feel like if I didn't read it, it would be sort of, in my case, like a sin of omission almost. So I'm going to read a poem called The Literature of Prescription. The title of the poem it comes from an exhibit about Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and it's a traveling exhibit. It was for a while at Nova Southeastern University in Davie. She's most well known for the story, The Yellow Wallpaper, right? About a lady who is suffering from postpartum depression and is basically kind of locked up, confined to her bedroom, and is supposed to be resting all the time. And eventually, as the story progresses, she descends into madness and becomes kind of obsessed about this yellow wallpaper in the room. So kind of like how when I've heard that when the movie Psycho came out, people were like afraid or something to take a shower if they were home by themselves. And that like when Jaws came out, there were people who were like, I don't know if it's true, but even afraid to like go into the swimming pool or something. Well, I've heard that. So a similar thing happened. People started like really rethinking about their, decorative wallpaper after they read that story. And some people thought she was like doing a public service by writing it. In a way she was, I think. But, about the treatment. So the literature prescription. Just one sec. So this poem is about Charlotte Bronte and Charlotte Perkins Gilman and a couple of other things. Charlotte Bronte mentions suffering from bad headaches and migraines in her letters. There's a really great author named Margaret Smith who has edited like 3 volumes. Each of them are like this of her letters. And then some of the letters are as long, some of the footnotes are as long as the letters or longer, right? And I kind of noticed that like when there's a headache mentioned, like half of the time it's like a stressful or like an emotional event that triggers it. But the other half of the time, I really think it was like the weather, or like where she lived, the gales kind of buffeting the parsonage. So, all right. The literature of prescription. And there's a quote that says that is Charlotte Perkins Gilman describing Dr. Mitchell's advice in 1913. He was her physician, and he had her do the rust cure, which gave her, the idea once she recovered of writing the yellow wallpaper. And he told her, live as domestic a life as possible, and never touch pen, brush, or pencil as long as you live. Well, it's what they believed at the time, But, all right, let me just start. This is what the doctor prescribed. Perhaps she trusted him because of the paternal eyes, well-groomed beard, and commanding stethoscope. Praised by Freud, females flocked to Mitchell's sanitarium. He was a renowned rest cure expert. She a thwarted activist, an ambivalent wife, and a despondent mother. Perhaps Perkins thought she needed to relent, surrendering the juggling act and handing over the reins, initially comforting. Next month, tomorrow, right now, irrelevant. Acquiescence, her new best friend, a silent partner, an ally coaxing her to abandon plans for saving the world, coaxing her to ignore the calendar, ditch the wristwatch, draw the curtains. Keeping blackout curtains drawn and lingering in bed a little longer, a temptation one always faces during days of endless rain in the sunshine state, where neighboring streets threaten flood. Humidity swallows all rational thought, and the barometric pressure, flighty tramp, forces the right side of my head to throb like an expectant cock. Stormy days, I yearn for the cliched return to womb, desire to exchange one form of solitude for another, to swap an imperfect quiet for a restful silence. Instead, I insert earplugs to muffle the impertinent downpour and settle for the bedroom's embryonic darkness, while my husband inhabits the library's calm pallor. A medical librarian, my husband researches new treatments, hoping to discover a therapy that will extract the ache from my head the way tweezers remove a splinter. Versed in the language of pain, the vernacular of chronic daily headache, CDH, infiltrates the mundane. Sumatriptans, ergotamines, NSAIDs, MAOIs, serotonin syndrome, rebound headache. Mornings, my husband prepares a vitamin cocktail of milk thistle, fish oil, feverfew, B6, B100, and butterbur. He deposits the capsules inside a pill box labeled breakfast, lunch, afternoon, bedtime. Before grabbing briefcase and coffee cup and vanishing into the congested city, he places the pill box on the kitchen counter like a valentine. An unlikely valentine, I down the pills to ward off the frequency and severity of CDH, classified as experiencing 15 or more days per month with headache. A rare breed, CDH patients are wired with a hyperexcitable cerebral cortex, with abnormal control of pain neurons in the brainstem. The body is duped into believing that pain is normal. Cells are held hostage by the choreography of an infinite loop. The headache cycle akin to a needle stuck in a record's groove. At onset, pain is a malevolent presence, searing the scalp every second, a hot poker pinching the neck, forceps continually clamping the temples. Chronic headaches torment an unfortunate 4 to 5% who are unresponsive to most meds. I'm unresponsive to Topamax, Percocet, Frova. I have a greater chance of getting buzzed off the scent of shampoo than from OxyContin. Because of our bodies' stubborn indifference to meds, many female patients are written off as psychosomatic or hysterical. My own Veer Mitchell, my first neurologist, proposed a creative remedy for my malaise. Head cocked, seated on his big leathery chase, the physician gave me the one-over, then soberly proclaimed I needed a boyfriend. Maybe he envisioned, yes, perhaps he envisioned my vagina dilapidated and at the mercy of cobwebs. Did anyone offer similar counsel to CB? Her letters mention facial neuralgia, disenchanted days, bedridden, head throbbing, wind howling across desolate moors. Bronte's head throbbed as wind howled across desolate moors. She suffered acutely when winter gales buffeted Hove. Her primitive migraine remedies included ingesting arsenic, citric acid, brain duster tablets, and Walcott's Instant Pain Annihilator. Two of its known ingredients, opium and ethyl alcohol. As for Walcott's syrup, depict a man besieged by demons. The headache demon sits on the forehead, one leg perched on each brow. A pair of neuralgic demons jab at teeth with pickaxe and pitchfork. At times, Bronte pushed past this discomfort, channeled lambasting pain into pristine prose. Perhaps she would have been more prolific without migraine, without Robert Southey's infamous advice. Yeah, Robert Southey is in here too. He was poet laureate of England for 30 years. The poet laureate's infamous advice, reminiscent of Dr. Mitchell's. The daydreams in which you habitually are likely to indulge in are likely to induce a distempered state of mind. And in proportion as all the ordinary uses of the world seem to you flat and unprofitable, you will be unfitted for them without becoming fitted for anything else. Literature cannot be the business of a woman's life, and it ought not to be. The more she is engaged in her proper duties, the less leisure will she have for it. Charlotte Perkins Gilman renounced the rest cure, recovered, and wrote the yellow wallpaper. Charlotte Bronte followed Southey's admonition selectively, writing as a means of soothing the mind and elevating it, which is also what the poet prescribed. I'm going to read a poem now that's a bit more cheerful. This one is called St. John Rivers Pops the Question. In the novel, he's a missionary. He becomes a missionary. And I know that he's kind of manipulative and exacting and the whole thing. But one of the things that I like about St. John is that when Jane is homeless and destitute, he does allow her to recover in his home. He has her clothed. He fed. Even gets her a job, right? When she's trying to rebuild her life. And I think people overlook that because they're always focusing on him being so controlling, even though he kind of is. But then there's a character in the book named Helen, who's Jane's best friend. And I think everybody should at some point hopefully have a good friend like Helen. So Helen makes an appearance in this one. Charlotte Bronte had a friend named Mary Taylor who went to school with her. And at one point, Mary Taylor moves to New Zealand and writes a letter to Charlotte saying, I have lately met with a wonder, a man who thinks Jane Eyre would have done better to marry Mr. Rivers. Ooh, okay. Hold on one sec. Actually, the title of the poem, I think I may have said the wrong title. The title of the poem is Jane Dreams of Rescuing Helen. Sorry about that. That's the title of the poem. Jane Dreams of Rescuing Helen. St. John makes an appearance in more than one poem, so. All right. It's this idea of if you could rewrite someone's fate or destiny, it's that kind of impetus. Jane dreams of rescuing Helen. She hacked bloody mucus, made 2 fists, then pummeled her chest, trying to breathe. I woke to her lifeless form, one hand splayed against the bed rail, the other still gripping an inhaler. I've traced the inscription on her tombstone with my forefinger. When amber alerts flash, I suspect Brocklehurst and Scatcherd faked her death. Then auction her to a child prostitution ring in Guatemala, or perhaps as a mail-order bride in Thailand, where she's bewildered by the language and landscape, by swarms of balding men, each old enough to be her father. In my daydreams, she kneels and prays God will appoint me the agent of her deliverance. After rescuing Helen, we return to Northumberland, where she wanders across familiar moorland, observes curlicues soaring overhead, bills curled downward in greeting. Helen is eventually adopted by wealthy New Zealanders, doting parents who say her beauty surpasses Helen of Troy's. As they tuck her in bed, and her favorite pets are named Francis and Claire, a pair of sheep she takes to show and tell and parades at local fairs. She displays their award-winning ribbons and medals beside the gold enameled teapot in her mother's china cabinet. On Halloween, she dresses as Little Bo Peep and takes Francis and Claire trick-or-treating, makes rounds at nativity plays, the placid sheep always reposing beside baby Jesus' manger. As an adult, Helen transitions from beloved Sunday school teacher to well-known televangelist. Millions tuning in to hear the word as they sip morning coffee. The image of Helen's kind face and relaxed demeanor while reading scripture remains with them, changes their lives in subtle ways. Audience members refrain from nail biting, cutting in traffic or at checkout, from spanking children for minor offenses. A staunch viewer, St. John admires Helen's dynamic preaching and missionary work. He shreds Rosamond's picture. After a brief introduction and whirlwind romance, St. John and Helen exchange vows and head to India, where camera crews film their experiences as part of a new Christian reality show. Always a brainiac, Helen's aptitude for languages enables her to pick up Hindustani faster than I ever could. A byproduct of Scatcherd's punishments, she's developed a high threshold for tolerating discomfort and never complains of sweltering heat. Her indomitable spirit always inspires St. John's fervent admiration. A devoted husband, he thanks his maker for Helen's piety and patience, for the beautiful blaze of hair he unpins and brushes after evening prayer. So the next one I'm going to read is going to be the last one. I started with Jane, so I want to end on Bertha. So this is called Letter to Bertha, and there's a quote before the poem begins from the novel Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys, and the quote says, "There are always 2 deaths, the real one and the one people know about." Letter to Bertha. If I could, I'd save you. Flies beneath your bed hiss, "Bertha, Antoinette, Bertha." Though you plug your ears with lima beans, syllables seep in like dust pushing past closed shutters, like loco weed creeping across the garden wall, the mute battlements. Better to bust out of yourself, to let the oversized roach motel burn before your so-called husband stuffs you in a body bag, seals you like a cracker in a Ziploc. I'd set you up in a beachside condo, stocked with your favorite dahlias, Arabian Nights, black satins, Burma gems. I'd hire a good massage therapist and enroll you in yoga. I'd take you to a spa, treat you to a mud bath, restore those charcoal-stained feet to their original hue. Have a stylist trim that cave woman hair. You'd take up kickboxing and swimming. You'd see a shrink who specializes in pyromania, who'd prescribe an antidepressant cocktail for those unpredictable mood swings and panic attacks. After shopping for a new wardrobe, a red dress, and matching slingbacks, we'd climb the Statue of Liberty. We'd toss your straitjacket into the ocean, and along with it, each vestige of sadness that has tinged your bloodshot eyes. I'd make you forget Edward. I'd cradle your face in my hands, and I'd kiss you, a hypnotic lip lock extinguishing each bad memory, obliterating suffering from your lexicon. Bertha, if I could, I'd save you. Thank you.
All right, folks, quick reminder for our internet audience watching at home that there are still a couple minutes for you to call the number on your screen, and we can ship today's books to wherever you are in the U.S. free of charge. For those of you here in the house, we have the Jane and Bertha in Me, as well as American Sentencing, and a few other Jen Karetnick titles for sale at the counter in the front room over there. Jen and Rita are going to be signing here at the table to the left of the podium. I want to thank our guest introducer, Mia Leonin. Thank you. And those were lovely readings. Please give another hand for Jen Karetnick and Rita Maria Martinez. Thank you. All right.